The gates loomed taller than anything the boy had ever seen. Iron bars twisted into shapes that seemed almost alive, guarding a mansion whose lights burned like a different world. His small hands clutched a worn envelope, creased from being, folded too many times, smudged with the sweat of a nervous grip. To anyone else, it was nothing. To him, it was hope. He hesitated. The night air felt colder here, cleaner, as though even the breeze refused to belong to someone like him. A security guard eyed him with suspicion. A car swept past, gleaming, tires whispering against stone. He stepped forward anyway. Inside that house were people he had only ever heard of, millionaires who lived in a universe beyond his imagination. But he wasn't here to beg. He wasn't here to steal. He had come for something far simpler, something he thought every child deserved. What he found instead would scar him forever. His name was Arif, though most people never bothered to remember it. On the streets of the old city, he was just the poor boy with the quick hands, running errands, shining shoes, carrying groceries for a few coins. At 12, his shoulders already stooped under burdens heavier than his frame. Home was a single-room dwelling at the edge of the city, with a tin roof that rattled whenever the wind picked up. His mother, once strong and lively, now spent most of her time fighting off a cough that seemed to dig deeper each winter. She worked when she could, mending clothes, stitching torn fabric for neighbors. But it was Arif who had become the steady hand, the one to bring bread back at dusk. His sister Sana was the opposite of their weary world. She laughed easily, even when her stomach growled, even when her shoes had holes. To her, Arif wasn't just a brother, he was a shield, the boy who would face the world so she could keep her smile. Every night as the kerosene lamp flickered, Arif would tell her stories, not fairy tales, but visions of futures he wished they could have. One day, Sana, we'll live in a place with windows so clear you can see the stars without stepping. Outside. And you'll have books, not just scraps, real books with pictures, colored pages. She would listen wide-eyed, as if he were painting a promise rather than a dream. On the rare mornings he managed school, Arif sat quietly, absorbing every word the teacher wrote on the blackboard. Other children teased him, his shirt too thin, his shoes mismatched, but Arif never argued. He carried the insults like he carried heavy baskets at the bazaar, silently, with a bent back and clenched jaw. What none of them knew was that Arif loved words. Words, he believed, were treasures you could carry without pockets. He copied poems into the margins of his notebook, sketches of mansions and gardens filling the spaces between. To him, education wasn't about passing exams. It was about building doors inside his head that no poverty could lock. One evening, while helping a shopkeeper stack crates, Arif overheard men talking about a powerful businessman, Mr. Kamal, a millionaire whose mansion towered above the city on the hill. Rumors painted him in gold, imported cars, chandeliers, parties where music spilled into the night. Some said he had a heart of steel. Others said he was generous in ways few ever saw. The very next day, fate placed a sealed envelope into Arif's hands. "Deliver this to Mr. Kamal," the shopkeeper instructed. "Straight to the mansion. Don't lose it." The boy's heart raced. The mansion on the hill. The place he had, only seen from a distance, glowing against the night sky like a forbidden kingdom. On his way home, Arif mentioned the errand to his mother. Instead of excitement, her face tightened. "Arif," she whispered, "people like us. We don't belong in houses like that." "But I'm only delivering a letter," he argued. Her silence was louder than words. Even Sana, usually filled with wonder, frowned. "Promise me you'll come back quick," she said, tugging at his sleeve. Arif laughed softly to reassure them. But in the pit of his stomach, he felt the weight of their unease. It was as though the letter he carried wasn't just sealed with wax, it was sealed with warning. And yet, when the day came, he walked up the hill, past neighborhoods that grew quieter and richer with each turn, past gates that shut tighter, walls that rose higher, until, at last, he stood before the towering iron gates of Mr. Kamal's mansion. The guard at the gate narrowed his eyes the moment Arif approached. "What do you want, boy?" His voice was sharp, slicing the night air. Arif held out the envelope, with both hands, as if it were sacred. "I was told to deliver this, for Mr. Kamal." The guard frowned, looked him up and down. His gaze lingered on the torn collar of Arif's shirt, the dust on his sandals. "Wait here." Minutes dragged into an eternity. Arif shifted from one foot to the other, clutching the envelope tighter. When the gate finally creaked open, he was waved inside, not with respect, but the way one might wave off a stray dog that refused to leave. The mansion was overwhelming. Marble floors polished to glass, chandeliers dripping light like waterfalls, walls lined with paintings whose colors seemed to shimmer. Arif's heart hammered in awe and unease. Every step he took echoed, as though the house itself wanted to announce his presence. Servants passed by carrying trays of silver and crystal. None of them smiled. Some didn't even look at him. Others did, but only with the kind of glance that stung, eyes sharp with silent judgment. What is he doing here? He was told to wait in the hallway. Chairs with velvet cushions lined the wall, but when Arif tried to sit, a maid shook her head. "Not there! Stand!" So he stood, hands clasped, letter pressed against his chest, while wealthy guests swept past him. A pair of children about his age stopped to whisper. One giggled. The other wrinkled his nose. "Why is he inside?" the boy muttered, loud enough for Arif to hear. "He smells like the street." Heat rose in Arif's cheeks. He lowered his eyes, staring at the marble beneath his feet. Then, for a fleeting moment, kindness appeared. A young girl, perhaps the millionaire's daughter, paused in the corridor. Unlike the others, she didn't sneer. She tilted her head, curious, as if trying to understand why this boy with tired eyes and a wrinkled shirt stood clutching an envelope like it was life itself. But before she could say a word, a servant pulled her along. Her gaze lingered, though, and in that gaze, Arif felt something he hadn't expected. Recognition, a spark that said, "I see you, time crawled." When at last a man in a pressed black suit approached, Arif's relief was short-lived. "This letter, where did you get it?" the man demanded. "The shopkeeper gave it to me," Arif replied softly. "He said it was for Mr. Kamal. He trusted me." "Trusted you?" The man's voice dripped disbelief. "Or maybe you saw an opportunity." Before Arif could protest, one of the servants stepped closer, patting his pockets roughly. Coins clinked, the few he had earned that day, his only wage. The servant pulled them out, holding them up as though they were evidence of a crime. "Look," he sneered, "already carrying money." Arif's heart sank. "That's mine," he whispered. "I worked for it." But the words barely left his mouth before a harsher one followed. "Thief!" The word struck him like a slap. His mind pulled back to the schoolyard months earlier, when another boy had lost a pencil and accused Arif. No one had believed him then either. The teacher's disappointment, the classmates' whispers, it had burned itself into his memory. Now, here it was again. Different walls, same wound. The commotion drew attention. A pair of wealthy guests stepped into the corridor, curiosity piqued. "What's happening?" one asked. "Street boy brought a letter. Could be a trick," a servant explained. The guest's eyes lingered on Arif as though he were an insect pinned under glass. "People like him shouldn't be allowed past the gate," the guest muttered. "Dangerous, untrustworthy." Each word was another stone added to the weight, crushing Arif's chest. Desperation cracked through his fear. "I didn't steal anything," Arif said, louder than he intended. His voice shook, but his eyes lifted for the first time, meeting theirs. "I came to do what I was asked. Nothing more." A tense silence followed. Some servants exchanged uneasy looks, but no one spoke for him. The power in that house did not belong to a boy like Arif. Then came the blow that would push the night toward heartbreak. The envelope, creased from his careful grip, slipped from the man's hand and fluttered to the marble floor. Before Arif could move, a polished shoe stamped down on it. Not by accident. Slowly, deliberately. The millionaire himself had arrived. Mr. Kamal stood tall, dressed in a suit that seemed to shine under the chandelier. His presence silenced the corridor. His eyes fell on Arif, cold, calculating, uninterested. "What is this?" he demanded. The suited man bowed slightly, handing him the trampled envelope. "A street boy, sir. Claims he was sent to deliver this. We suspected his intentions." Kamal barely glanced at Arif before tearing open the letter. He read quickly, lips tightening at whatever words filled the page. When he finished, he folded it back into its envelope and tossed it onto a nearby table, as though it were worthless. Then his eyes met Arif's again, flat, dismissive. "Send him away." And just like that, Arif's hope began to crumble. The guards hauled him across the polished floor, through the towering doors and out into the night. His small frame stumbled onto the gravel path. The gates clanged shut behind him, iron and final. The letter he had been entrusted with, the one task that might have brought him dignity, was no longer in his hands. And worse, the letter of his own dreams had been torn from his heart, trampled under their laughter. Arif knelt on the ground, knees scraping against the stones. For a long moment he didn't move. He didn't cry. He simply listened to the sound of the party resuming inside, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, as if his humiliation had been nothing more than a passing distraction. In the silence of his own mind, the questions raged. Why? Why do they hate me without knowing me? Why does a dream make them laugh? Is being poor a crime? Am I invisible? Or worse, just a shadow to be kicked aside? He clenched his fists into the gravel until his skin stung. His eyes burned, but no tears came. He had learned long ago that tears made the world no kinder. The walk home was long. Gravel crunched beneath Arif's worn shoes, each step echoing the weight of the night. Above him, the mansion's lights burned like distant stars, untouchable and mocking. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply walked, carrying the silence of humiliation like a second skin. At the door of their tiny home, his mother noticed the slump of his shoulders first. She rushed forward. "Arif, what happened?" He shook his head, unable to speak. The envelope in his pocket was gone. The words he had held so carefully, dreams and hope, had been exposed, mocked, and destroyed. His mother pulled him into a tight embrace. Her hands were rough, calloused, but her heart beat fast with worry. "It's okay, my son. You're home. You're safe." Sana peeked from behind the curtain, eyes wide and fearful. Are they mean?" Arif knelt to meet her gaze. "Yes, but it doesn't matter. I did what I had to do." Even as he spoke, he felt the sting of shame, the echo of laughter from the mansion. It would not leave him quickly, but in the warmth of his mother's arms, he remembered something essential. He belonged somewhere. Not in golden halls, not under chandeliers, but here, in the place that loved him unconditionally. That night, Arif lay awake on his thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. His dreams, once carried in a letter, were still alive in his heart, though battered. The injustice he had faced would not be forgotten, but neither would the small spark of hope he carried for a better future. His mother's whispered words haunted him in a good way. "Your worth isn't in their eyes, it's in yours." And for the first time, he understood that dignity could not be given. It had to be claimed, nurtured, defended even when the world tried to take it away. The next morning, the city woke to its usual hum. Vendors shouted, children ran to school, and the world seemed unchanged. Yet for Arif, everything had shifted. The mansion on the hill, once a symbol of distant wonder, now represented a harsh truth. Wealth could shelter cruelty, and status often silenced humanity. But Arif also understood something far more powerful. The judgment he endured, the sneers and accusations, they could not define him. He carried within him a strength the mansion's golden walls could never contain. In the days that followed, the story of the poor boy at the millionaire's house began to ripple through the neighborhood. People discussed it quietly, how easily society writes off those born with less, how little a smile or a gesture of kindness could mean in someone's life. Some questioned why no one inside that house had defended him. Others remembered their own moments of injustice, realizing they too had overlooked someone's humanity. The incident became a quiet mirror, reflecting a world where wealth and privilege often clash with innocence and hope. For Arif, the lesson was both bitter and clarifying. He learned that life would not always be fair, that cruelty could appear where it was least expected, and that innocence was no shield against judgment. Yet he also learned resilience. His dreams, though tested, remained intact. The sparkle of hope could not be trampled, only delayed. That evening, as he helped his sister with homework and listened to his mother's soft prayers, Arif realized something profound. Dignity was not granted by opulence or approval. It was forged in the quiet strength to keep walking, to keep dreaming, and to keep believing in oneself when the world refuses to see your worth. The story of that night serves as a reminder to all. Cruelty is often invisible to those who hold power, but small acts of kindness, an understanding glance, a shared word of encouragement can ripple far beyond a single moment. Every child, every person carrying a quiet dream deserves to be seen, heard, and respected. Arif's journey did not end with humiliation. It began with awareness that injustice exists, awareness that dignity must be nurtured, and awareness that empathy is the bridge between worlds of gold and worlds of struggle. As he looked at the stars that night, far above the mansion, he whispered softly to himself, "One day they will see. One day the world will learn that hearts cannot be measured in wealth." And in that whisper, there was both pain and promise. A testament to resilience, a call to humanity, and the enduring power of hope.